Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Getting In a College Coach Conversation. I'm Sally Ganga. So, we're wondering if seniors, maybe you're unhappy with your college coach for this fall, and so are maybe considering transferring. If so, then you're definitely going to want to listen to segment 2 when I chat with Ryan Kelly about the pluses and minuses of starting college with the intent to transfer. Ryan Kelly is new to College Coach, having previously worked at institutions like Colorado University at Boulder and Fordham. So we're really pleased to have him. And then for our last segment, we'll be talking with Beth Feinberg Keenan, one of our college finance experts, about how to pay for graduate and professional degrees. But first, I'm really pleased to welcome Cameron Vigliotti. I think I said his name right. He'll correct me. Vigliotti, actually. Sorry. A physical therapist here in Fairfield County with Motion Physical Therapy. We get so much interest from students in becoming a physical therapist, and I thought it would be a great thing to have one on to discuss his pathway and what he looks for when he hires, as well as aspects of his experience. So welcome, Cam.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate getting the time to talk with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is huge interest in physical therapy. And other than the fact that I go to physical therapy, I don't know that much about the experience, although I can certainly see why it's appealing to students. But like one of the things that happens a lot when I'm talking to students about it is that, they're an athlete, right? And they're like, yeah, I was thinking I'll be a physical therapist. And I'm like, okay, do you like science? Do you want to go to graduate school? And they're like, no and no. Like, okay, this is actually a pretty long degree program. So why don't we kind of dig into this? Like, why don't we, if you were talking to a high school student, right, who said, oh, I really want to be a physical therapist, what are some of the things that you would tell him or her?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in general, that is the thing that people think of, that they're going to become a physical therapist and treat, the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox and people like that. And you very well may. But the reality is you probably will not. So majority of our caseloads here in an outpatient setting is we treat across the lifespan. So I can see, a 6-year-old with a broken arm, one half an hour. And then I might see, an 88-year-old with a broken arm the next half an hour. In the mix of that, there definitely are some younger athletes who we'll take care of from time to time. But I'd say predominantly the people utilizing our services are people over 50. And they need, just as much care as that 18-year-old who tore their ACL or something like that. So that's definitely could be like a little bit of a misconception centered around the field. And, definitely science is going to be a major contributor. You need to be strong in your sciences and have a desire to want to learn in that area to be successful as a physical therapist. There are, I don't think I took a ton of English courses and things like that. I didn't write a ton of papers, but I had to sit for a lot of exams and memorize different things in relation to pathophysiology and the general sciences, and take exams and pass those exams to basically get where I am today. So it's not so much heavy on literature and but it is definitely a lot of exams.
So you got to be good at memorization at a kind of a baseline. So what kind of, I mean, I know that there are some direct paths to physical therapy, but it's not what everybody does. What was the path that you took? What was your undergraduate major? That kind of thing.
Yeah, so there's a variety of ways that you can get to, sit for your national board to become a physical therapist. In my case, I went to Boston University and got a bachelor's of science in athletic training, which is probably what some of the students you're referencing are thinking of. The people that run out on the field at the New York Giants football game and assess injuries and stuff like that. So that was my undergraduate degree. But to become a physical therapist, basically what that got me is it set me on my curriculum to apply to PT school. So it made sure I took the right biologies, the right chemistries, the right physics, all the right courses to basically meet the requirements to apply for PT school. The other common undergraduate degrees that you'll see people applying to PT school in is exercise science, psychology. Some universities have just like health sciences, But as long as the degree, gets you your prerequisites to apply to PT school, it doesn't really matter. I think actually my boss, I believe he went to Sacred Heart University where I got my doctoral degree, my graduate degree. He went there for his whole time, I believe. And I think he was an art and illustrations major.
Okay.
So he didn't, it just showed you that he went a different way once he really kind of got into the field. And so it just make sure you have to take those certain prerequisites, but really you can have any, but it's usually a Bachelor of Science of some kind.
So it's really like medical school. I mean, you can be pre-med and be a history major or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Another thing I want to highlight that you said is that it's not just biology classes, anatomy, physiology that are prerequisites, but you mentioned physics and chemistry.
Yes.
Because I imagine those are the most challenging for some of the students.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So there is, I think, again, in my curriculum at Boston University, I think I took 4 different chemistry courses. I took 2 or 3 physics courses, biomechanics courses, a lot of gross anatomy, but the major sciences, we also take, I think, 3 or 4 psychology courses. You're pretty much hitting most of the major sciences if you're doing really anything in the health related field, whether it's nursing, physical therapy, becoming a doctor, whatever it is.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I always want to underline that because it's very
Sure.
disappointing for some of my students when I tell them that. So it sounds like if you don't figure out that you want it until after you graduate from college, that's okay too, because you could probably take the prerequisites kind of after the fact if you needed to.
Definitely. So the place that I currently work, a lot of our part-time employees are just of that. They went to college. They weren't really sure what they wanted to do. They got some form of a degree and they decided later on. So they're working for us while they're, going back to whether it's a community college or a local university here to kind of get those prerequisites done to be able to apply for the doctoral programs. But it's much easier if you decide at 18 or 19 that this is what I want to do. And you take them while you're at your 4-year university. So in my case, I started my doctoral education when I was 22 and I was a doctorate of physical therapy by the time I was 25.
Okay.
So I didn't take any breaks.
Right. And then one of the pathways, if you do know at age 18, is there are some schools that have these direct pathways where you can shave a year off, right?
Yes, exactly. So most of the major universities are, at least, that have been around for a while, offer these accelerated programs. So they're called the 3+3 option, and you can perform your education in 6 years. You come out ready to sit for your national exams, but you pretty much do undergraduate in 3 years and graduate school in the last 3 years. The only drawback is when you're a senior, you're in your first year of graduate school and your friends are probably seniors in college and, getting to enjoy being a senior, and you might be in the thick of, studying.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that that's not a pathway for everyone because not everybody really does know. And so as much as going the longer route costs a little more money, et cetera, which is not nothing, you're also probably more sure that this is what you want to do.
In my case, I did the 4+3, but my good buddy, my college roommate did 3+3, and we were both successful in our pathways.
Yeah, exactly. So let's kind of back up then and say, like, who gets hired? Like, what are kind of the skill sets? Because everybody knows, okay, so you need to be good at science, right? Now we've established that. But what are other skill sets that you're looking for if you're hiring someone? Is it the school that they attended, or is it other things?
Sure, good question. So I hire a fair amount of physical therapists every year, and although, you'd like to think, or personally as a hiring manager, I don't always really look at what university they went to, unless I have some sort of a connection that I knew a professor or I went there myself. Really, for me, it's, did that university allow them to sit for their national boards and pass their national boards? Because if you went to the #1 PT school in the country, but you could not pass your national board examination, then you can't be a physical therapist for me because you didn't get a license. So really the university, obviously we want you to, come from a reputable university that you had a good experience with, but as someone that hires people, I don't pay attention as closely to that. And the things I primarily pay attention to is, your personality and your communication style. The thought is that you'd have learned a lot of the nuts and bolts of what you're doing during your schooling. But a lot of times, my company, we spend 18 months mentoring new graduates that come in to kind of hopefully build and mold them into the therapists that we want them to become. So the reality is, I think a lot of times we can kind of guide the therapist to doing the manual techniques the way that we want them to do it. But a lot of times we can't teach that communication. We can't teach your personality. So I'm looking for people that can communicate well with people that of all different ages and races and backgrounds, and have a nice calm demeanor, and can multitask and can work in sometimes a stressful environment without losing their cool. And some physical therapists are great at that. Then I have someone that knows every inch of the book, but you ask them to say hello to a patient and it's very strange and awkward, and I'm usually not hiring them.
Yeah. In all honesty, the last physical therapist I went to before you, the reason I left is because they would give me something to do and then sit on the phone.
Sure.
And I was like, why am I paying you? You could just give me a list of exercises. You're supposed to be observing, and
and
it
that's
was
a
really
common complaint that people get, that we'll hear, that they left somewhere and came to us, and someone either sat on their computer or no one paid attention to them. So really, that's how we're touching people. We're touching from showing them this exercise, but it's really getting to know them and helping them. And really, more times than not, the patient's going to remember that they felt better if they enjoyed working with the therapist.
Right. And I think that's important, because I think students do forget about the soft skills. So, in some ways, good preparation might be like being a hostess at a pizzeria, right? Because you gotta talk,
and I looked for that on resumes all the time. Did they work in college? Did they have things that they were, other areas where they could attribute those skills to being a PT? I like those. So if someone puts on the resume, oh, I worked at a pizzeria as, the checkout person for 4 years throughout college, that's a plus for me.
Yeah, exactly. So I think let's go now and kind of wrap up by talking about pros and cons. My sense is that you really enjoy your job, which I think is great. And then, but what are any cons that people should be aware of?
Sure. So I think the major, I say this to my wife, at least a couple times a month. The pro is that, I think most of us love our jobs. We get to come into a fun environment where everyone's, we're talking sports, listening to music, helping people. We're not sitting at a desk all day. This is probably the most I'll sit at a desk all day today, is to do this podcast. But I'd say the cons are potential cons, depending on the environment you have behind you going into different types of universities. Is most of us take on a fair amount of debt to get into this profession, whether it be from undergraduate school, but a lot of us take most of it on from doing that 3 years of graduate school. And you can make a nice living doing this. Like we're living comfortably, the salaries that we get paid, and we're doing it, but we are not millionaires. We're not, taking home large sums of money each year, that we're buying yachts and things of that nature. So, you are dealing with the debt that you've accrued from the universities that you went to. So if you do decide to go down this path, be smart. While you're, if you have to take debt, try to minimize it as much as you can. Maybe work that part-time job to take out a little less money, because in the reality, in the end, you are going to pay it back at some point. And the faster you can pay it back, the better. I'm 35 years old and I've been paying it for 10 years. And I'll continue to pay it. Hopefully soon enough that when my daughter goes to college, that I won't have anymore, and I can help her take on some debt. But,
exactly.
So that's the biggest con. The other cons that people deliver sometimes, choosing your employer. If you choose an employer that wants you to see 25 patients in an 8-hour day, you can get burned out really quickly. Our job at, our company at Motion PT Group is we really stress that you see 12 patients a day in an 8-hour. So, you're seeing patient for probably about 40 minutes with each patient. And Sally can attest to that, the time I spent with her. we're allowing you to have that hopefully positive effect on your patient's life. So that's what, beware if you do get into this field, depending on your employer, you really want to ask those questions. How much time do I get to spend with each patient? Do I get to provide quality care?
Mhm. All right, great.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate
Yeah, thank
it.
you guys. I appreciate the time.
Okay. All right. We're going to be taking a break now, but we'll be right back.